Hello and welcome to Art Show. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Bruce Pollock. Hi, Bruce. How are you today?
Hello, great, Greg. Greg, how are you?
Good. I am eager to start sharing some of your work. I've got a
Mhm.
bunch of questions for you. So, like normal, I went on your website and
Mhm.
other social media stuff and saw a bunch of pictures that I had questions about. Uh,
Okay.
but I wanted to start with this particular picture.
Mhm.
Now I'm hoping people react to this picture much like I did, which was I was blown away by this image, and I
Mhm.
think it's because for me, what really does it is the depth of field that this picture really has. So there's multiple structures, one on top of the other. Um, can you tell me a little bit about this picture? Is this an important picture in your OVR, or is it just another one-off and I'm just amused by it?
No, I've shown this painting a lot. It's a large painting, which I think people should understand. It's like 6 by 8 feet. So when you're in front of it, I wanted the feeling of really being immersed into deep space cosmos,
Yes.
that was it. And uh, depth is something that's real important to me in painting. I really like what I like about painting is that it is the illusion of space that painting creates. I am not a, a flatness painter,
Mm-hmm.
painter of flat space. So,
Well, the question I had about this one was this particular painting has something that's not in your drawings or the prints, and that
mhm,
is that the the lines that you use, especially let's take for example
mhm,
the thin lines that you're using.
mhm.
I'm loving how you're varying the hue, right? You're changing it
Yes. Yes.
over time. Now, is I gotta ask, is that something that was it pre-planned or was that you just changing midstream?
Well, no, it's really an evolution of this work that I've sort of developed that. This body of work has been evolving for 15, 18, well, my whole life ultimately. But um, so, as it evolves, I'm able to bring kind of new levels of sophistication into how line and color and shape are articulated. So,
When
uh, so underlying the whole painting is this matrix, which is ultimately formed from uh, circles, a tangent network of circles that are then created by lines. Well, it's probably too much to have to explain, but
so
uh,
as a
but
painter,
so this pattern is these floating shapes and the linear network are all part of the same pattern.
okay. So as a fellow painter, the question that first popped into my mind when I saw this is
Mhm.
when once you've begun this painting, how loose are you about changing your ideas mid painting? Or once you set the parameters for it, do
Mhm.
you force yourself to stay within that?
Well, the painting really grows while it's being done. I don't really have a picture in my mind of what I want the painting to look like when it's
Mm-hmm.
done. It really grows. And even though am imposing kind of a structure, obviously, in the painting, that within that structure, there's always a lot of chance because it gets into these sort of levels of complexity
Mm-hmm.
that chance intervenes, and so there it goes. Yep, that's it.
So when you mentioned chance,
Yeah.
which was the perfect segue to talk about this particular painting.
Hmm.
So I thought this
Yeah.
was also a stunner. But what really did it for me was the, I guess, lack of chance in the way that your lines are going, they're
Hmm.
weaved together, they're woven together. So they're
Hmm.
some are above, some are below, some are way below. But
Hmm.
it's so you talk about chance, but at the same time, you have to have a plan for something like this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there is a real symmetrical structure to this, and this painting preceded the one before it by many years. And
Okay. All right.
this painting is in oil, and again, a lot of what's happening here is there is a foundational um, network,
Mm-hmm.
or it's not a grid per se, but a foundational network. And what happens is there's this fractal uh, changing, is that each one of these levels is reduced uh, into a smaller version of itself.
Mm.
Uh,
This one feels like it has more rules than the first one
yeah,
that you showed.
well, yeah, because the symmetry is really
Hmm.
pretty intense,
But even the color, and
Yeah.
I can't tell if it's the photograph or if it's the actual painting where it gets lighter in the center there. Are you using like an almost metallic paint, or is that just
No,
that's just the lighting?
um, no, that's just the way the color is used.
Okay.
I've worked a lot with color and studied color, and there's a aspect of color which Joseph Albers, painter Joseph Albers, called is where you use color in such a way that the color actually seems to be illuminated, that it actually can create a sense of light in
Mm-hmm.
the picture by its contrast to other hues. And that's a lot comes from the change in value and in the change in hue. So that you'll notice in the, as well as this network changing scale, every time it changes scale, it also shifts in color range and it also shifts in value. So it sort of brings it so that you have this sense of illumination.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, that
which,
it works really well in this
yeah,
picture. And the reason I chose this one in
yeah.
particular was
Mhm.
I stared at it for quite a while, and it took me a couple of minutes before I realized that really wonderful light blue that you're using is like a
Yeah,
there's like a support behind there. And I thought it was great that I didn't see it at first, but now it's like, oh yeah, it's there as a support structure.
yeah.
I'm kind of curious about. I'm guessing that both nature and math are drivers for
Hmm.
you, and
Yes.
I'm kind of curious what is it about those things that that you find so interesting?
Well, I'm more interested in mathematics in respect to that mathematics is found in nature.
Mhm. Yeah. So are you
In
thinking like
that,
Fibonacci sequence
well,
or
that enters into it. Really, like uh, any kind of linear or any systems that are detectable in nature, because nature is really abounds in geometry
hmm
at all levels of scale.
hmm
And that's sort of the kind of geometry that interests me. I don't, I'm no mathematician,
hmm
but mathematics uh, also was originally derived from observations in nature, from the
hmm
observations in the world. So there's this observational aspect to it that
So
interests
would I be correct in assuming you had mentioned earlier that you don't have a pre-planned image in your head? So does that mean that you just approach each piece of, in this case, like I think this is paper, a
me. Yes.
blank piece of paper? Do you approach it as an experiment because you kind of know what you want to do, or do you is it a little bit more crystal?
I um, under let me explain a little bit about how this drawing takes place. Is that it starts out, I with pencil, I create this, um, like I said, this um, matrix that's
Mm,
underneath it, which
mhm,
is in this case based on uh, a matrix of tangent circles. And then I sort of connect uh, the circles, and it sort of starts to create this linear network. And then I sort of build and it's a random network.
mhm,
But a lot of what interests me is this notion of pattern,
mhm,
but also of random patterns, not patterns as
mhm.
well. Some patterns sometimes can be symmetrical, and sometimes there can be random symmetry. So,
Like a
uh,
chaos theory kind of a thing.
yes, sure,
Okay.
absolutely. So,
Are you telling me that you draw these in pencil first and then ink them?
yes.
Okay.
Well, I draw the foundation, which is it at the start. And then these are done with a rapidograph pen.
Uh-huh.
And then I just sort of go in and then I sort of grow out the drawing. I just start and um, it just grows. Yeah.
Right. How do you know when to stop?
Well, when I get to the edge of the paper,
Okay.
stop.
That's perfect. I love that's the greatest quote I've heard all day.
And of course, sometimes I leave space open where there
Uh-huh.
isn't drawing. So you can see in this that there are these polygons of light space, of
Hmm.
open space. So, a lot of that is just decisions that are made in the process, and something happens, and there it is. Yeah.
Do you keep a sketchbook or
Yes.
are your works just oh you do?
Oh no,
It
I do a lot of drawing,
okay.
planning.
Do you find yourself are you inventing new patterns all the time, or are you open to like, oh, there's a pattern. Let me take that. Do you ever copy patterns?
Um, yeah, I'm inventing. Um, I feel like uh, I'm on to some kind of geometry
Mm-hmm.
uh, in my art that I've never seen it anywhere else in art. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of that is what uh, interests me is where can I take it? Where can it go? What are the limits of what's possible with it? And so this is a print, actually.
And it's been
Uh,
wonderful to see that what you
yeah,
just said about how you can
yeah,
take each pattern to different conclusions.
yeah.
But I like the fact that you're also doing it within the medium. So I wanted to ask you about I chose this piece because it is a
Mhm,
print. This is an
mhm.
etching with aquatint.
Yes, it's an
Okay.
etching oxygen.
So obviously, first question I got to ask you is are you editioning these or are you just using printmaking to make the
Uh,
image once?
there was a small addition with it.
Okay.
I had an invitation to do a print, and this is with Cindy Ettinger Editions in
Oh yeah.
Philadelphia,
Oh, Cindy did this.
and Cindy worked with me on this.
Did you learn printmaking years ago, or is it something new that you've
I
picked up?
I had a printmaking class when I was in art school, but
Okay.
I'm not a printmaker. But
Okay.
the
Well, actually,
printmaking
I would think you are now.
well, the printmaking medium interests me, and a lot of in the process because there's a kind of a layering
Yeah.
uh, process that
Well, that first
it's
painting that
suitable.
we talked about is definitely a printmaking process.
Mhm.
Thinking way of thinking of making an image. Um, so I before we go too farther, I have one last
Uh,
image. So I had to ask you about these. These are
yeah.
just wonderful little forms.
Mhm.
How did these pop about?
Well, these were uh, blocks is what I call them. Um, they, oh boy, this goes back to the 1970s.
Yeah, that's great. Great to
Uh,
know.
uh,
I had a feeling they were younger, and there's quite a few of these
yes,
sets that you have on
yes,
your website. So
yeah.
I chose this one in particular. I just thought it just was
Hmm.
such a stunning image, and it does help inform, I think, for me as a viewer, some of your newer work. You know, there's
Yeah,
still that structure that's there, and the way that you're layering the colors on top.
yeah.
It worked, and I assume that they're important since even though they're older, they're still on your website.
That they're what? They're
That they're important to you, that
yeah,
significant.
yeah. I love to live with them.
Okay.
People who are watching this need to know that they are really about 6, 8 inches in dimensions. So there's something you can hold in your hand. They're paintings that you can hold. And
Are you still making sculptures?
no, not right now.
Okay.
I,
Right. Just
but these were made by I built these forms out of uh, there's a long story I can go into with these that I would love to
just
get
email me
into.
the story and we'll post it later.
But suffice it to say is that I built the forms out of sort of this crates, fruit crates that I got the wood, and I would build the forms out of that, and the forms were sort of mimicking architectural tropes.
Okay.
So and then I would paint them with layers and layers and layers of enamel paint. A
Uh-huh.
lot of them were found enamel paints, discontinued colors, and then I would sand them down
Get the yeah, bring some
to
of the back.
reveal these surfaces. So they really are very jewel-like in a way, and
So
yeah,
you mentioned that you take those and you sand them down, which is really
yeah.
sort of a destruction of the form itself. Do
Mhm.
you in your current work are you employing a destructive manner at all in your work? In other words, do you ever make something and say halfway through you destroy it or change your mind completely,
Oh yeah, well,
or you commit
no, sandpaper is one of my favorite too.
it? That's fantastic.
I don't, I always find in the working process that um, once you put something down, it's never really gone.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
always still there.
still part of you.
And so, you sand it down and you just paint over it or you put a glaze over it. And so there's a lot of layering.
Speaking of having things that change over time, I'm curious, how, how do you feel that your work has changed over time? Say from 20 some years ago to now. Do you still feel like it's an evolution, or have you gone through shifts?
Oh no, it's still evolving.
Still evolving. Okay.
And I still don't completely know where it's going.
So if you
And when I do,
know
that's
where it's
probably when I'll stop.
I hear that a lot from artists about not knowing where it's going. But one of the questions I do like to ask is when you're in the process of creation, does the idea of the audience ever enter your mind? Do you ever think about your audiences while you're making your work?
I don't really know. Um, at any time, I don't really know who my audience is,
Uh,
and if anything, it's uh, other artists and associates who have a familiarity with my work. But as
mhm,
far as other things, the audience has changed. I mean,
mhm.
since I made those blocks um, almost 50 years ago, I
Mhm.
mean,
You have a whole new
most
audience
of the
now.
audience is dead. So I don't know. So I don't really. It's a hard thing to nail down who an
Yeah.
audience.
So
Uh,
when you're thinking about your work, when you look back and think about all the things that you've done, I love asking this question because I'm always surprised. Do you consider your work to be autobiographical at all? Or are you maybe trying to make work that is separate from yourself? Ooh, I stumped him.
Well, I think there's always a biographicalness
Hmm.
to it, and um, sometimes it even seems prescient. It seems like the work is guiding me, rather is living through me rather than me living through it.
When you're in your studio and you're working on a piece and you're midway through, do you find when you're working, are you zoned in as to you're aware of everything that you're doing and what's going on, or are you zoned out and all of a sudden your picture's finished?
Hmm.
Maybe half and half?
Well, it's just I'm not a painter who throws paint around and kind of uh, paints like that way.
Right, right. But
So it takes a lot of focus to
yeah,
do what I do. It's a very focused activity. So
right.
I feel like I'm really present, but I move into the painting and back. So when I'm working on it, I'm really into the small
Uh-huh.
parts of it. I'm really into the small construction in the brush stroke, and not I'm not aware of how the whole thing is taking place.
Uh-huh. I love asking that question because it's so the answers are so varied. And
Yeah.
I get a lot of artists that tell me that it's for them, it's like highway hypnosis. Like they were driving somewhere and all of a sudden they got there, but they don't remember the process. But other artists like yourself, which I would imagine, each mark has its own reason
Yeah.
for being.
No,
So
I I watch pretty closely, and work, and then I sit back and I look at it, and then it's like it's real, uh, a gradual process.
how
Of,
often are you in your studio?
well, my studio is in my house,
Uh,
my home,
uh-huh.
so I'm here all the time.
Okay. Are you
Uh,
working all the time?
I'm not working all the time because
Okay.
there's other things going on. I usually have a couple different directions going on at the same time. I may be doing something with drawing at
Uh-huh.
the same time.
You work on multiple pieces at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Do you
like
have
now I'm working on these on watercolor images, and I'm also doing some acrylic paintings, and I also am
mhm.
doing drawings. So I'm bringing things through at different rates. And
When you're working on multiple pieces at the same time, do all of those pieces have similar structures to them, or can you paint like what's behind you? You have, some patterning on your one side and then almost sort of nature forms on the other. Can
Mhm.
you work like that? Like no problem? Or is it usually like, okay,
Well,
it's all about patterns this week?
right now, yes, right now it's sort of like that. That
Mm,
There's the work has um, there are affinities, so they kind of are feeding each other. And I guess I'm always trying to draw them together. It would be nice to just sort of bring it all into one
good luck.
thing, and that it'll happen with time, but that's not something you can force. It just really has to.
Are you comfortable working in smaller formats? Is that really your wheelhouse, or are you hoping to someday make gigantic pictures?
Well, I've done uh,
I know you've done both. I'm just kind of, what do you
It's like that first painting you showed is, like I said, it's like 6 by 8 feet. So, I have worked in large scale. Those kind of scales just require a very different level of responsibility in terms of where do you store it,
Yeah.
how much how much it all costs, and you know, uh, and also a lot of my work again is I'm not painting for a particular customer or
Mm,
something. So, the selling it or having it go out into the world is a very uncertain
hmm
thing. And so, I you have to be conservative about um,
hmm
how I spend uh, my energy on it, and what I have.
I got time for two more questions for you. First
Okay.
one is I'm just kind of curious. You walk into your studio in the morning, you're going to get ready to do something. You don't know what you're going to do. Do you have any sort of studio rituals that you find yourself doing to get yourself moving? Or can you just walk in and start right away?
Well, I usually when I leave the studio, I like to leave an opening
Hmm.
so that when I come back, there's somewhere to enter into it.
That's
So,
fantastic.
I mean, I think that's what I like to do,
You know,
and
I
it
can't figure out
doesn't
why didn't
always
I ever think of
work.
doing that? It sounds
It doesn't
great.
always work, and sometimes I'll just sit there and stare at a white rectangle, and we'll see what comes.
Uh, last question. Question I ask all artists: what does making art do for you?
Well, it's I'm a curious person. Curiosity is really important to me, and it's this curiosity that just keeps you looking at the world
Hmm
and analyzing it and trying to understand it and, you know, who are we, where are we going? Big questions and smaller questions. So I just feel like the what my creative practice is, what art is it just keeps me alert and curious um, about life.
Yeah, that that makes sense. Perfect answer for me. Well, Bruce, I wish I had more time. I got a bunch more questions for you. But thank you so much for coming by
Yeah.
and talking with me today. I really appreciate it. And I also want to thank everybody who tuned in to watch ArtShow today. We really appreciate your support. We would love it if you would like and subscribe to ArtShow. That helps push us forward. And every time you subscribe, more people will see this video. So it's worth doing. So again, thank you for watching. And again, Bruce, thanks for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate
Thanks for the invitation, Craig.
it. I look forward to your next exhibit. All right. Take care, everyone.